Marcus Rivera wiped his grease-stained hands on his coveralls for the third time that morning. But the black smudges refused to disappear. The ancient Honda Civic on the lift above him dripped oil steadily into a pan that was already overflowing. His small garage in the industrial district of Phoenix smelled of motor oil, old coffee, and broken dreams. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The clock on the cracked wall read 11:47 a.m., and Marcus hadn't seen a single paying customer all week. The stack of overdue bills on his desk seemed to grow heavier each day, and the landlord's latest notice was printed on paper so bright it practically glowed in the dim light of his workspace. Outside, expensive cars hummed past his garage door. Without slowing down, Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas, all heading to the gleaming dealership service centers. Across town, where mechanics wore clean uniforms and had dental insurance. Marcus pressed his face against the grimy window and watched a silver Bentley glide by like a ghost from another world. He was about to turn away when he saw her. The woman stood at the corner of Industrial Boulevard and 5th Street, looking more lost than anyone Marcus had ever seen. She wore a cream-colored designer coat that probably cost more than his rent, and her dark hair was pulled back in a style that screamed expensive salon. But it was her expression that caught his attention, pure panic mixed with the kind of helplessness that comes from being completely out of your element. She held her phone high above her head, turning in slow circles like she was performing some kind of desperate dance. Her heels clicked against the cracked pavement as she took tentative steps in different directions, only to stop and check her phone again. Marcus could see her lips moving, probably talking to herself, or maybe to whoever was on the other end of what appeared to be a very frustrating phone call. The morning sun caught the tears forming in her eyes. Something in Marcus's chest tightened. He'd seen that look before in his own mirror, usually around the time his utilities got shut off. Different circumstances, same desperation. Marcus glanced back at the Honda Civic. Mrs. Peterson from down the street had brought it in 3 days ago with a transmission problem, but she couldn't afford to fix it until her disability check came in next week. The car wasn't going anywhere, and neither were his bills. But this woman looked like she needed help right now. He grabbed a clean rag from his workbench. Well, relatively clean, and walked outside. The desert heat hit him immediately, even though it was barely noon. Phoenix in October was still brutal, and this woman was dressed for air conditioning and marble floors, not blazing sun and broken asphalt. "Excuse me, ma'am," Marcus called out as he approached. "You look like you might be lost. Everything okay?" She spun around so quickly. She nearly stumbled. Up close, Marcus could see she was younger than he'd first thought. Maybe late 20s, with the kind of flawless makeup that suggested she'd started her day with very different plans. Her eyes were wide and rimmed with red, and her hands shook slightly as she clutched her phone. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't quite place. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I'm completely turned around. My GPS keeps saying location not found, and I've been walking in circles for 20 minutes. Marcus noticed her shoes first, delicate heels that were never meant for broken sidewalks. One of them had a scrape along the side, probably from catching on the uneven pavement. Her feet had to be killing her, but she was trying not to show it. "Where are you trying to get to?" he asked, already pulling out his own phone. The screen was cracked, and the case was held together with electrical tape, but it worked. "The Morrison Foundation building," she said, pulling a business card from her purse. "I have a meeting at noon, and I called an Uber, but the driver dropped me off here and said this was the address. But there's nothing here except..." She gestured helplessly at the row of warehouses and auto shops. This. Marcus looked at the business card. The Morrison Foundation, he'd heard of them. They funded community programs and gave scholarships to kids from low-income families. The address on the card was definitely not Industrial Boulevard. "Ma'am, I think your driver made a mistake," Marcus said gently. "The Morrison Foundation is downtown, about 15 miles from here. This is Industrial Boulevard. We're way out in the warehouse district." Her face went white. 15 miles? But my meeting. "It's in 10 minutes. I flew in from Seattle just for this presentation, and if I miss it, she pressed her palm against her forehead, they'll never reschedule. This was my one shot. Marcus could see her trying not to fall apart completely. Whatever this meeting was about, it meant everything to her. He recognized that kind of desperation, the feeling that your entire future hinged on one moment, one opportunity that you couldn't afford to mess up. "Hey, it's going to be okay," he said, though he wasn't sure how. "Let me think for a second." He looked around the empty street. No taxis, no buses, and calling another Uber would take at least 20 minutes in this part of town. His own truck was in the garage with a busted radiator that he'd been meaning to fix for 3 weeks. The only vehicle he had that actually ran was his motorcycle, a beat-up Harley he'd bought from a guy who owed him money. "What's your name?" he asked Elena. She said, still clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Elena Vasquez. I'm Marcus." "Listen, Elena, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I've got a motorcycle in the garage. If you're okay with riding on the back, I can get you downtown in 15 minutes. Traffic won't be an issue." Elena stared at him like he'd just offered to fly her there himself. "Why, oh you would do that? For a complete stranger?" Marcus shrugged. "You need help? I've got 15 minutes to spare." He didn't mention that he had a lot more than 15 minutes to spare. He had all day, and probably all week. Elena looked down at her designer outfit, then at the garage behind him with its peeling paint and hand-lettered sign that read Rivera's Auto Repair. Honest work. Fair prices. Marcus could practically see her weighing her options. Show up to the most important meeting of her life on the back of a stranger's motorcycle or miss it entirely. "Okay," she said finally. "Yes, please. I'll pay you, of course. Whatever you think is fair." "Don't worry about that right now," Marcus said, already heading toward the garage. "Let's just get you where you need to be." He wheeled the Harley out of the garage, grateful that he'd cleaned it the week before when he was procrastinating on his taxes. It wasn't pretty. The paint was faded and the chrome had seen better days, but it ran smooth and it was fast. Elena stared at the motorcycle with a mixture of terror and determination. "I've never been on one of these before," she admitted. Marcus assured her. "Just hold on tight and lean with me on the turns. Don't fight it. The bike knows what it's doing." He handed her his spare helmet, a black one with a few scratches, but no cracks. She took it with trembling hands and managed to get it on, though it messed up her perfect hair completely. Marcus climbed on first, then helped her settle behind him. "Put your arms around my waist," he instructed. "Don't be shy about it. If you fall off, neither of us is going to have a good day." Elena's arms circled his waist tentatively at first, then tightened as he started the engine. The Harley roared to life with a sound that echoed off the warehouse walls. Marcus felt her jump slightly behind him. "You okay?" he called over the engine noise. "I think so," she called back. Though her voice was tight with nerves, Marcus pulled out of the garage and onto Industrial Boulevard, taking it easy at first to let Elena get used to the sensation. After a few blocks, he felt her relax slightly. Against his back, her death grip on his jacket loosened, just enough that he could breathe normally again. The route to downtown Phoenix was mostly straightforward, but Marcus knew the shortcuts. He took them through neighborhoods that Elena had probably never seen, past taco trucks and laundromats, through intersections where day laborers waited for work, along streets lined with chain-link fences and buildings that had seen better. Decades, at a red light, Elena leaned forward slightly. "This is incredible," she said, and Marcus was surprised to hear something like excitement in her voice instead of pure terror. "I can see everything." She was right. On a motorcycle, the city was completely different. You could smell the food from the restaurants, feel the temperature change as you rode through shadows, hear conversations from open windows. It was raw and immediate in a way that being inside a car could never match. The light turned green and Marcus accelerated smoothly, feeling Elena's confidence grow as they moved through traffic. She was a quick learner, leaning into the turns without him having to tell her, anticipating the bike's movements. As they got closer to downtown, the scenery began to change. The warehouses and auto shops gave way to office buildings and trendy restaurants. The streets got cleaner, the cars got newer, and the people on the sidewalks looked more like Elena and less like Marcus. "There," Alina shouted over the wind, pointing ahead. That's it, the tall building with the glass front. Marcus could see the Morrison Foundation building rising ahead of them, all gleaming steel and tinted windows. It was the kind of place where people made decisions that affected thousands of lives, where handshakes were worth millions of dollars, where someone like Alina belonged and someone like Marcus definitely didn't. He pulled up to the front entrance with 3 minutes to spare. The building's security guard, dressed in a uniform that probably cost more than Marcus's entire wardrobe, watched them with undisguised suspicion. A few pedestrians in expensive suits turned to stare at the unlikely pair. Alina climbed off the bike and immediately reached for her purse. Please, let me pay you. This was ... You saved my life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I didn't save your life, Marcus said, taking off his helmet. I gave you a ride. That's what people do. But Alina was already pulling out her wallet. No, you don't understand. This meeting, it's for a program I've been developing for the past 2 years. It helps low-income families get access to job training and financial literacy courses. If I missed this presentation, hundreds of families would lose their chance at a better future. Marcus felt something twist in his stomach. Job training for low-income families. People like him, in other words. People who worked with their hands and worried about rent money and had skills but not connections. That sounds important, he said quietly. Alina pressed a $50 bill into his hand before he could protest. It is important, and none of it would have happened without you. She paused, studying his face. What's your name again? Your full name? Marcus Rivera. But really, you don't need to, Marcus Rivera, she repeated like she was memorizing it. Thank you, Marcus Rivera. I mean that. She turned and walked toward the building entrance, her damaged heels clicking against the pristine sidewalk. The security guard held the door open for her, and just before she disappeared inside, she turned back and waved. Marcus sat on his motorcycle for a moment, watching the building's revolving doors spin. Through the glass walls, he could see Alina talking to a receptionist, probably getting directions to wherever her meeting was. She looked like she belonged there, even with her helmet hair and her scraped shoes. The $50 bill felt heavy in his pocket as he started the bike and pulled away from the curb. It was more money than he'd made all week, just for doing what felt right. But as he rode back through the city, retracing their route through the changing neighborhoods, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. Just had no idea what. Back at the garage, the Honda Civic was still dripping oil into the overflowing pan. The stack of bills still sat on his desk, and the landlord's notice still glowed like a beacon of financial doom. But somehow, the day felt different. Marcus hung his helmet on its hook and went back to work, humming slightly under his breath. Outside, the expensive cars continued to glide past his window. But for the first time in months, he didn't feel invisible. The next morning started like every other morning in Marcus's cramped apartment above the garage. The alarm clock's shrill beeping cut through the thin walls at 6:30 a.m., followed immediately by the sound of his upstairs neighbor's baby crying. Marcus rolled over and stared at the water stain on the ceiling that had been growing larger each week. Wondering if today would be the day it finally broke through completely, his shower lasted exactly 3 minutes, long enough to wash off yesterday's grease but short enough to keep his water bill from climbing higher. The mirror in his bathroom was cracked down the middle, splitting his reflection into 2 uneven pieces. Marcus looked tired. Right side, Marcus looked broke. Outside needed coffee. Downstairs in the garage, Mrs. Peterson's Honda Civic sat, exactly where he'd left it, still leaking oil onto the concrete floor. The transmission job would take most of the day once he finally got the parts, but parts cost money he didn't have. It was a classic catch-22. He needed work to pay for parts, but he needed parts to do the work. Marcus fired up his ancient coffee maker and surveyed his kingdom. 3 service bays, 2 of them empty, a tool chest that had seen better decades, a computer system that crashed every time he tried to run diagnostics, and a phone that hadn't rung with new business in over a week. The $50 Alina had given him yesterday sat on his workbench, like a small miracle. It was enough to buy groceries for a few days, maybe even enough to get the Honda's transmission parts if he shopped around for used ones. But somehow spending it felt wrong, like he'd be breaking some kind of spell. He was still staring at the money when the rumbling started. At first, Marcus thought it was a delivery truck. The warehouse district got plenty of those big rigs hauling pallets of merchandise to the distribution centers down the street. But this sound was different, smoother, more refined. The rumbling grew louder, accompanied by what sounded like classical music. Marcus walked to the window and peered through the grime-streaked glass. What he saw made him question whether he was still dreaming. A black limousine was turning onto Industrial Boulevard. Not just any limousine. This was the kind of vehicle that transported diplomats and movie stars. It was icily 30 feet long, with tinted windows so dark they looked like black mirrors. Chrome gleamed despite the early morning dust. And the license plate read Foundation 1. Marcus watched in fascination as the limo glided past the auto parts store, past the welding shop, past the abandoned gas station with its rusted pumps. It moved with the same quiet confidence as a shark cruising through shallow water. Completely out of place in this neighborhood of broken dreams and peeling paint? The limo slowed as it approached. Marcus's garage. Then it stopped. Marcus's coffee mug slipped from his hand and shattered on the concrete floor, but he barely noticed. Through the garage's open bay doors, he could see the limo's passenger window rolling down with mechanical precision. A hand emerged, a woman's hand wearing what looked like a very expensive watch, and waved directly at him. The rear door opened, and Alina Vasquez stepped out. She looked completely different from the panicked woman he'd rescued yesterday. Gone was the cream-colored coat and the desperate expression. This Alina wore a charcoal gray business suit that probably cost more than his motorcycle, and her hair was styled in a way that suggested she'd had professional help. But her smile was the same, warm and genuine, and a little bit mischievous. "Good morning, Marcus," she called out, walking toward the garage with confident strides. Today's shoes were sensible flats, he noticed. Lessons learned. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, acutely aware of his oil-stained work clothes and the coffee spreading across the floor behind him. "Alina, what, ... how did you, ... find you?" She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "You told me your name was Marcus Rivera, and this place is called Rivera's Auto Repair." It wasn't exactly a mystery. She gestured toward the hand-painted sign above his door, though I'll admit my driver had some difficulty locating Industrial Boulevard. Apparently, it's not in the usual GPS database for limousine services. Marcus glanced past her at the limo. The driver was a tall man in a black suit who looked like he could bench press a small car. He stood next to the vehicle with his hands clasped behind his back, scanning the street with the alertness of someone accustomed to protecting valuable cargo. "Your driver?" Marcus repeated weakly. "Oh, that's Thomas? It's been with the Morrison Foundation for 8 years. Excellent driver, terrible sense of direction in industrial areas." Elena's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Yesterday was quite an adventure for both of us." Yesterday. Out. Marcus felt like his brain had been filled with cotton. "Out of your meeting?" "Go!" Elena's expression grew serious. "That's actually why I'm here. Marcus, do you mind if we talk inside? I've something I'd like to discuss with you." Marcus looked around his garage with fresh eyes, seeing it the way Alina must see it. The cracked concrete floor, the flickering fluorescent lights, the general atmosphere of financial desperation that hung over everything like a fog. Not exactly the ideal setting for entertaining Foundation executives. "It's not much," he said, suddenly embarrassed. "I mean, it's just a garage. I don't even have a proper office or anything." "It's perfect," Alina said firmly. "This is exactly where I want to be." She followed him inside, her heels clicking against the concrete. Marcus quickly kicked an empty oil can out of her path and gestured toward the least dirty chair he could. Alina sat down gracefully, apparently unbothered by the automotive chaos surrounding her. "First," she said, pulling a manila folder from her briefcase, "I want to thank you again for yesterday, not just for the ride, but for everything. Your kindness, your willingness to help a complete stranger, the way you handled the situation. With such calm professionalism, Marcus shifted uncomfortably. It just gave you a ride. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Elena said quietly. They wouldn't have. Do you know how many people I asked for help before I found you? 7. 7 different people walked past me and not one of them even slowed down. You were the only person who stopped to see if I was okay. She opened the folder and pulled out a thick stack of papers. A presentation yesterday was about a new initiative called the Community Skills Bridge Program. It's designed to help people who have valuable skills but lack the resources or connections to build successful businesses. Marcus nodded politely, though he wasn't sure where this was going. The program provides microloans, business development, support, and most importantly, connections to potential customers who might not otherwise know about skilled tradespeople in underserved communities. Elena's voice grew more animated as she spoke. We're talking about electricians, plumbers, mechanics, carpenters, people who do excellent work, but struggle to compete with larger companies that have marketing budgets and corporate contracts. That sounds like a great program, Marcus said, and he meant it. He'd known plenty of skilled workers who'd been forced out of business not because they couldn't do the work, but because they couldn't afford to advertise or didn't know the right people. Elena smiled. I'm glad you think so, because I'd like you to be our first participant. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Marcus stared at her, certain he'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? Yesterday, after you dropped me off, I had 45 minutes to kill before my presentation. So I did some research. Elena pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. Rivera's Auto Repair has been in business for 6 years. Your customer? Reviews are outstanding. Everyone talks about your honesty, your fair prices, and your willingness to explain problems instead of just fixing them and charging for parts people don't understand. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks. Those are just neighborhood people. They don't have a lot of money for car repairs, so I try to be straight with them. Exactly, Elena said. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You have integrity, skill, and a commitment to serving your community. But you're struggling financially because you don't have access to the resources that would help you grow your business. She pulled out another document. This is a business assessment. I had our team prepare based on publicly available information. Your overhead is low, your debt-to-income ratio is manageable, and your location has excellent potential for expansion. You're not failing because you're bad at what you do. You're struggling because you don't have the capital to invest in growth. Marcus's head was spinning. Elena, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I don't understand why you're doing it. You barely know me. I know enough, she said simply. I know you helped a stranger when you had every reason not to. I know you refused to let me pay you fairly for saving my career. I know you live above your garage and work 7 days a week trying to keep your business alive. She paused. And I know you're exactly the kind of person this program was designed to help. She handed him the folder. I'm not offering you charity, Marcus. I'm offering you an opportunity. A chance to turn your garage into the kind of business it could be with the right support. Marcus opened the folder with trembling hands. The first page was a loan application for $25,000. The second page outlined a business development program that included marketing support, customer referral systems, and access to wholesale parts suppliers. The third page showed projected revenue increases based on similar businesses that had participated in pilot programs. $25,000, he whispered. It's a loan, not a gift, Elena clarified. Low interest, flexible repayment terms. But still a loan. You'd be expected to pay it back as your business grows. The foundation doesn't give handouts. We make investments in people we believe in. Marcus read through the documents, his heart pounding. New diagnostic equipment, updated computer systems, marketing materials, money to hire an assistant so he wouldn't have to turn customers away when he was backed up with work. It was everything he'd dreamed about during the long, sleepless nights when he'd stared at his bills and wondered how much longer he could hold on. This is incredible, he said finally. But I have to ask, why me? You said this was a new program. Surely there are other mechanics, other small business owners who could benefit from this. Elena's expression grew thoughtful. Do you remember what I told you yesterday about the program I was presenting? Something about job training and financial literacy for low-income families? That's part of it. But the real goal is to create a network of community-based businesses that can provide good jobs for people who might not otherwise have opportunities. Your garage could be the anchor for an entire ecosystem of skilled workers. She leaned forward. In her chair, Marcus, I grew up in a neighborhood a lot like this one. My father was a mechanic too, actually. He worked for other people his whole life because he never had the chance to start his own business. He was brilliant with engines, but he didn't know how to write a business plan or apply for loans or market his services. And he died working in someone else's shop, making someone else's dream come true. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, Elena said. Be inspired. My father never got his chance, but you're getting yours. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Outside, the morning was warming up. Marcus could hear the sounds of the industrial district. Coming to life, delivery trucks, power tools, the distant hum of machinery. It was the soundtrack of his world. It's familiar and comforting in its predictability. But sitting in his garage with Elena Vasquez and her manila folder full of possibilities, Marcus felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff. Behind him was everything he'd ever known: struggle, uncertainty, the constant worry about money and failure. Ahead was something he'd never imagined possible, a real chance to build something lasting, something that could make a difference in his community. I need to think about this, he said finally. Elena nodded. Of course, this is a big decision. Take all the time you need. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. But Marcus, don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't come around often. And when they do, they don't wait forever. She walked toward the garage entrance, then paused. I'll be in Phoenix for the rest of the week working on program details. If you have questions, call me. She handed him a business card. And Marcus, whatever you decide, thank you for yesterday. You reminded me why I do this work. Elena walked back to the limousine, where Thomas held the door open for her. As the car pulled away from the curb, she rolled down the window one more time. Think big, Marcus Rivera, she called out. The world needs more people like you. The limo disappeared around the corner, leaving Marcus standing in his garage doorway with a folder full of dreams and a business card that felt like it was made of gold. The morning sun slanted through the open bay doors, illuminating the oil stains on the concrete and the dust motes dancing in the air. Mrs. Peterson's Honda Civic sat exactly where it had been for the past 3 days, still waiting for parts he couldn't afford. But now, maybe he could afford them. Maybe he could afford a lot more than that. Marcus walked back to his workbench and spread out the loan documents. It was more money than he'd ever seen in one place, more money than he'd ever imagined having access to, but more than that, it was validation. Someone believed in him. Someone thought his little garage was worth investing in. He picked up his phone and stared at Elena's business card. All he had to do was call. All he had to do was say yes. But first, he had a transmission to fix. 3 days passed before Marcus touched Elena's business card again. He'd carried it with him everywhere in his shirt pocket while working under the hood of Mrs. Peterson's Honda. Tucked inside his wallet when he walked to the corner store for his daily coffee, lying on his nightstand while he stared at the ceiling and tried to fall asleep. The loan document sat on his kitchen table like an unopened letter from the future. Every morning, he'd eat his breakfast of instant coffee and day-old donuts while staring at the manila folder. And every morning, he'd leave for work without opening it. Fear was a funny thing. Marcus had rebuilt engines with his bare hands, crawled under cars that weighed 3 tons, worked with electrical systems that could stop his heart if he made one wrong move. But the thought of signing his name to a loan application made his hands shake like he had palsy. On Thursday morning, everything changed. Marcus was replacing the brake pads on a rusted Chevy Silverado when he heard shouting from the street. Rolled out from under the truck to see Mrs. Peterson standing in his doorway, waving a piece of paper like a battle flag. Marcus, she called out, her voice cracking with emotion. "Marcus, you beautiful, wonderful man." Mrs. Peterson was 73 years old and built like a linebacker. She'd raised 6 kids as a single mother and worked 30 years in a textile factory before her arthritis forced her into early retirement. Marcus had never seen her cry, but tears were streaming down her weathered cheeks as she practically danced across his garage floor. "Mrs. Peterson, what's wrong? Is everything okay?" She grabbed his grease-stained hands in hers, not caring about the dirt. "Wrong. Nothing's wrong, honey. Everything's perfect. Look at this." She thrust the paper at him. It was a check of cashier's. Check made out to Marcus Rivera in the amount of $1,500. The memo line read, "Honda Civic transmission repair and additional services." Marcus stared at the check, confusion clouding his thoughts. "Mrs. Peterson, I don't understand. Where did this come from? You said you couldn't afford the transmission work until—" "That's what I thought too," she interrupted, her eyes still bright with tears. "But yesterday, this lady came to my house, beautiful lady in a fancy car, said she was from some foundation. She said someone had recommended me for an automotive assistance program." The pieces clicked together in Marcus's mind, like gears meshing in a perfectly tuned engine. "Alina," he whispered. "That's right, Alina Vasquez." She said a local mechanic had told her about my situation, about how I needed my car to get to my doctor appointments but couldn't afford the repairs. "She didn't give me charity, Marcus. She hired you to fix my car, paid in advance, and she wants you to do whatever else needs doing to make it safe." Mrs. Peterson's voice dropped to a whisper. She said good people deserve to have their kindness. Returned, "What did you do, honey? What did you do to make this miracle happen?" Marcus couldn't answer. His throat felt like someone had filled it with sawdust. Thought about Elena's words from 3 days ago. The world needs more people like you. But she was wrong. The world needed more people like her. "There's more," Mrs. Peterson continued. "She said she'd heard about your work from other people in the neighborhood, said she was starting a program to help folks like me, and she wanted to make sure I was taken care of by someone who understood what it meant to treat people right." She pressed the check into his palm and folded his fingers around it. "Fix my car, Marcus. Make it perfect. And whatever's left over, you keep it. Consider it payment for all the times you've helped folks around here for free." After Mrs. Peterson left, Marcus sat in his garage for a long time, staring at the check. $1,500 was more than he usually made in a month. It was enough to buy parts for 3 different jobs, enough to pay his overdue electric bill and still have money left for groceries that didn't come from the DAOLD rack. But more than the money, it was what the check represented. Alina hadn't. Jess offered him a loan. She'd already started investing in his community. She'd found a way to help Mrs. Peterson, while simultaneously throwing him a lifeline. It's creating a win-win situation that preserved everyone's dignity. It was brilliant. It was generous. And it was exactly the kind of thinking that could transform not just his business, but the entire neighborhood. Marcus walked to his kitchen table and opened the manila folder. The loan application was more straightforward than he'd expected. Basic financial information, a description of his business, his plans for the money. At the bottom was a line for his signature and the date. Just his name, written in blue ink, and $25,000 would become real. He picked up a pen, then put it down again. Picked it up, put it down. His hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. The phone rang before he could sign. "Rivera's Auto Repair," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Marcus, it's Alina. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "No, not at all. Actually, I was just Mrs. Peterson called me." Alina interrupted gently. She wanted to make sure I knew how grateful she was. "She also mentioned that you seemed surprised by the arrangement." Marcus found himself smiling despite his nerves. Surprised is one word for it. "Alina, you didn't have to do that. Mrs. Peterson is a good person, but she's not your responsibility. Neither were you. 3 days ago on Industrial Boulevard. But sometimes we help people not because we have to, but because we can." There was a pause. "Marcus, have you had a chance to review the loan documents?" He looked down at the application spread across his kitchen table. "I'm looking at them. Right now, actually," and Marcus took a deep breath. "And I'm terrified." Elena's laugh was warm and understanding. Good. That means you're taking it seriously. Marcus, can I tell you something? I've been working in community development for 8 years. I've seen hundreds of loan applications, met with thousands of potential program participants. Do you know what the most common mistake is? What? People think they're not ready. They think they need to have everything figured out before they can take the next step. But growth doesn't work that way. Growth requires faith. Faith in yourself. Faith in the process. And sometimes, faith in people who believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself. Marcus walked to his kitchen window and looked down at the garage. Mrs. Peterson's Honda sat in the first bay, ready for its new transmission. In the second bay, the Chevy Silverado waited for new brake pads. Simple jobs, but important ones. People counted on him to keep their cars running, their lives moving forward. What if I fail? He asked quietly. What if you don't? Elena countered. Marcus's failure is always a possibility, but regret is guaranteed if you don't try. And I don't think you're the kind of man who lives with regret easily. She was right about that. Marcus had spent too many nights lying awake, wondering what would have happened if he'd made different choices, if he'd stayed in school longer, if he'd taken that job at the dealership, if he'd been born into a family with connections and capital, instead of calluses and dreams. The application asked about my business plan, he said. I don't really have one. I know what I want to do, but I've never written it down in any formal way. That's what the business development program is for. We'll work together to create a plan that makes sense for your situation. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You just have to be willing to find them. Marcus picked up the pen again. This time, his hand was steady. Elena, if I do this, if I sign these papers and take this loan, what happens next? Next, we get to work. The foundation has a team of business consultants who specialize in helping small businesses grow. We'll analyze your current operations, identify opportunities for expansion, help you develop marketing strategies, connect you with wholesale suppliers. Think of it as having a personal board of directors, all working to help you succeed. And the other part, community jobs program you mentioned? Elena's voice grew more animated. That's where it gets really exciting. As your business grows, you'll be able to hire additional mechanics. We'll help you recruit from local job training programs, connect you with people who have the skills but need the opportunity. Eventually, your garage could become a training center itself, helping other people learn the trade. Marcus could picture it, a busy garage with multiple mechanics. Maybe even an apprenticeship program for neighborhood kids who wanted to learn a trade. Good jobs for people who needed them. Honest work that paid enough to raise a family and buy a house, and maybe even take a vacation once in a while. It sounds almost too good to be true, he admitted. The best opportunities usually do. Marcus, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Are you ready to bet on yourself? Marcus looked around his small apartment. At the water stain on the ceiling, the cracked mirror in the bathroom, the kitchen table covered with unpaid bills and impossible dreams. Then he looked out the window at his garage where Mrs. Peterson's car waited for a new transmission and a fresh start. Yes, he said. I'm ready. Then sign the papers and call me back. We have work to do. Marcus hung up the phone and sat down at the kitchen table. The loan application stared up at him, waiting. He read through it one more time, carefully, making sure he understood every clause and condition. It was fair, more than fair. The interest rate was lower than his credit cards, the repayment terms were flexible, and there were built-in protections in case the business struggled at the bottom of the last page, in a section titled Personal Statement. There was a space for him to explain why he wanted the loan and what he planned to do with it. Marcus had been dreading this part, but now the words came easily. He wrote about growing up in a neighborhood where good jobs were scarce and opportunities were rarer. He wrote about learning to work with his hands because his hands were all he had to offer. Wrote about the satisfaction of fixing something that was broken. Wrote of taking a car that wouldn't start and making it purr like a kitten. But mostly, he wrote about his customers. About Mrs. Peterson and her dignity. About single mothers who needed reliable transportation to get to work. About elderly people on fixed incomes who who trusted him not to cheat them. He wrote about wanting to build something that would serve his community for years to come. Something that would create jobs and opportunities for people who might not otherwise have them. When he finished writing, Marcus read the statement aloud to himself. It sounded like him, honest, straightforward, hopeful. It sounded like someone worth investing in. He signed his name at the bottom of the application with a flourish, then dated it with the current date, October 15th, a day he suspected he'd remember for the rest of his life. The phone rang again before he could call Alina back. Rivera's Auto Repair. Marcus, it's Alina again. I'm sorry to bother you twice in one day, but I just got off the phone with our program director. She wants to schedule a site visit for tomorrow morning, if that works for you. A site visit? Just a formality. She needs to see the business in person, make sure everything matches what's on the application. It shouldn't take more than an hour, and honestly, it's mostly just bureaucratic procedure. The real decision has already been made. Marcus felt his heart skip. It has. Marcus, I recommended you for this program personally. My word carries some weight with the foundation. Board. Unless there are any major surprises during the site visit, consider the loan approved. The words hit him like a physical force. Approved. $25,000. A chance to build something real. Alina, He struggled to find words that were big enough for what he was feeling. Thank you. This is going to change everything. No, she said gently. You're going to change everything. The money is just a tool. What you build with it. That's all you. After she hung up, Marcus sat in his kitchen for a while, processing what had just happened. In the space of 4 days, his entire life had been turned upside down. A chance encounter with a lost woman had somehow led to the opportunity he'd been dreaming about for years. He walked downstairs to the garage and looked around with new eyes. Soon, this space would be transformed. New equipment, better lighting, maybe even a proper office where customers could wait comfortably while he worked on their cars. He could hire help, take on bigger jobs, really make a difference in people's lives. Mrs. Peterson's Honda Civic sat in the first bay, waiting for its transmission repair. Marcus grabbed his tools and slid under the car, but for the first time in months, work felt like celebration rather than survival. Tomorrow, his new life would begin. But tonight he had a car to fix and a promise to keep. Some things, Marcus realized, never changed. And maybe that was exactly the way it should be. Marcus woke up before his alarm clock for the first time in years. The site visit was scheduled for 10 a.m., and he'd spent most of the night cleaning his garage with the intensity of a man preparing for surgery. Every tool was organized, every surface scrubbed, every piece of equipment positioned to show his operation in the best possible light. At 7 a.m., he stood in his shower longer than usual, using the good soap he'd been saving for special occasions. The face looking back at him from the cracked mirror seemed different somehow, younger, more alert, like someone who had reasons to be optimistic about the future. Downstairs, the garage sparkled in the morning sunlight. The concrete floor, usually stained with decades of automotive fluids, had been power washed until it looked almost new. The tool chest gleamed like jewelry, and even his ancient coffee maker had been scrubbed clean and repositioned to hide the worst of its dents. Mrs. Peterson's Honda Civic sat in the first bay, its new transmission installed and purring like a satisfied cat. Marcus had worked until midnight to finish the job, driven by a need to demonstrate his capabilities. The car ran better now than it had in 5 years. At 9:30, a silver Mercedes sedan pulled up outside the garage. 2 women emerged, both carrying briefcases and tablets, both dressed in the kind of professional attire that suggested they made important decisions for a living. The older woman, probably in her 50s, had steel gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to evaluating risk. The younger one looked fresh out of college with eager eyes and a notebook already open in her hands. Mr. Rivera? The older woman extended her hand. I'm Patricia Wells, Director of Business Development for the Morrison Foundation. This is Sarah Chen, our assessment specialist. Marcus wiped his hands on a clean rag before shaking theirs. Please. Call me Marcus. Welcome to my garage. Patricia surveyed the space with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen hundreds of small businesses. She walked slowly through each bay, examining his equipment, checking the organization of his tools. Running her finger along surfaces to test for cleanliness, Sarah followed behind, taking notes and occasionally snapping photos with her tablet. Elena mentioned, "You've been operating for 6 years," Patricia said, pausing next to his diagnostic computer. "What's your average monthly revenue?" Marcus had prepared for this question, but hearing it asked aloud still made his stomach tighten. "It varies seasonally. Summer months are usually better. People take road trips, need maintenance. Winter can be slow. Average is probably around $3,000 a month gross. And your overhead. Rent is $1,200, utilities run about $300, insurance is $450. I don't have any employees currently, so no payroll expenses." Marcus tried to keep his voice steady, professional. These numbers had kept him awake many nights. But spoken aloud, they sounded manageable, survivable. Sarah looked up from her tablet. "What about equipment, maintenance, and replacement costs?" "I do most of my own equipment maintenance. When something breaks, I usually try to fix it myself or find used replacement parts. It's not ideal, but it keeps costs down." Patricia nodded, making a note. "Elena's preliminary assessment suggested you have strong customer loyalty. Can you elaborate on that?" Marcus gestured toward a bulletin board covered with thank you cards and customer reviews. "Most of my business comes from referrals. People in this neighborhood don't have a lot of money to waste on unnecessary repairs, so word gets around fast if you're honest with them. I try to explain what's wrong, what needs to be fixed now versus what can wait, what they can expect to pay. I think people appreciate that." "How do you handle customers who can't afford needed repairs?" Sarah asked. The question hit closer to home than Marcus had expected. "It depends on the situation. If it's a safety issue, brakes, steering, something that could get them hurt, I'll work out a payment plan. Sometimes I'll do basic maintenance for free if someone's really struggling. It's not great for cash flow, but," he shrugged, "this neighborhood takes care of its own." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "It's commendable, but it's also not sustainable long term. One of the goals of our program is to help businesses like yours become more profitable so you can continue serving your community without compromising your own financial stability." She walked over to Mrs. Peterson's Honda and lifted the hood. The engine bay was immaculate, every component properly installed and clearly labeled. She examined the new transmission work, checking connections and fluid levels with the thoroughness of someone who understood automotive systems. "This is excellent work," she said finally. "Clean installation, proper torque specifications, attention to detail. How long did this job take you?" "About 6 hours, spread over 2 days. I had to wait for parts to arrive. And if you had better access to parts suppliers," Marcus felt a spark of excitement, "could probably cut that down to 4 hours, maybe less. Most of my delays come from sourcing parts. I don't have accounts with the major suppliers, so I end up paying retail prices and waiting for shipping." Sarah typed rapidly on her tablet. "The foundation has relationships with several wholesale automotive suppliers. Participants in our program typically see parts costs decrease by 30 to 40%, with much faster delivery times." 30 to 40%? Marcus couldn't hide his amazement. That kind of savings would transform his entire business. Model Patricia closed the Honda's hood and turned to face him directly. "Marcus, I'm going to be frank with you. Your operation is exactly what we're looking for. Skilled, honest, community-focused, but constrained by lack of capital and resources. Your customer service approach is exemplary. Your technical work is professional grade. And your facility has excellent potential for expansion." She paused and Marcus held his breath. "However, there are some concerns we need to address. Your current revenue levels suggest you're operating at barely break-even. Your equipment, while well-maintained, is approaching end-of life for several key pieces. And frankly, your location, while serving an important community need, limits your access to higher-value customers who could improve your profit margins." Marcus felt his heart sinking. Here it comes, he thought. The polite rejection, the explanation of why he wasn't quite what they were looking for, which is why Patricia continued, "This program is perfect for you. We're not looking for businesses that are already successful. We're looking for businesses with the potential to become successful with the right support. The relief that flooded through Marcus was so intense he had to lean against his workbench for support. Sarah stepped forward with her tablet. Based on our assessment, we're prepared to approve your full loan request of $25,000. Additionally, we'd like to discuss expanding your application to include some additional resources. Additional resources? Patricia smiled for the first time since entering the garage. Marcus, what would you say if I told you we wanted to feature your garage as a showcase location for our Community Skills Bridge program? I'd say I don't know what that means. It means we want to invest more than just money in your success. We want to partner with you to create a model that other communities can replicate. Better equipment, expanded services, maybe even a small classroom space where you could teach automotive skills to people looking to enter the trade. Marcus stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. You want to turn my garage into some kind of training center? Among other things, yes. We're talking about a comprehensive renovation that would transform this space into a state-of-the-art automotive facility while maintaining its community focus. New lifts, modern diagnostic equipment, a customer waiting area, office space, and, yes, a small classroom. Sarah pulled up images on her tablet showing similar projects the foundation had completed. Gleaming garages that looked like something from a car enthusiast magazine, but with the warm, welcoming atmosphere of neighborhood businesses. The total investment would be closer to $75,000, Patricia continued. Not all loan money. We'd be providing grants for the educational components and equipment that serves the broader community program. Marcus felt dizzy. $75,000 was more money than he'd made in the past 3 years combined. Why? He asked. Why me? Why this garage? Patricia's expression grew thoughtful. Honestly, because Alina Vasquez believes in you. Alina has excellent judgment about people. But also because you represent something we've been looking for. Authentic community connection, combined with genuine skill and integrity. You're not trying to get rich quick or build some automotive empire. You want to serve your neighbors and make an honest living doing work you're proud of? She gestured around the garage. This place has good bones, Marcus. Strong foundation, excellent location for community access, room to grow. But most importantly, it has the right owner. Someone who understands that success isn't just about profit margins, it's about building something that makes people's lives better. Sarah showed him architectural drawings on her tablet. These are preliminary designs based on your current space. The basic layout would remain the same, but we'd expand into the adjacent bay that you're not currently using. Add modern equipment, improve the electrical and HVAC systems. The drawing showed a garage that looked like his garage, but better. In every way, more organized, more efficient, more professional, but still recognizably the place where he'd spent the past 6 years. Learning his trade and building relationships with his community. There's one more thing, Patricia said. If you agree to participate in the showcase program, you'd be working directly with Alina on the implementation. She'd be your primary foundation contact throughout the renovation and program development. Smiled for the first time since the visit began. I think I can handle working with Alina. Good, because she specifically requested the assignment. Apparently you made quite an impression on her. Sarah handed him a new set of documents, much thicker than the original loan application. These are the full program agreements. Take your time reviewing them. This is a much bigger commitment than the simple loan we discussed originally. You'll be taking on more responsibility, but also gaining access to resources that could transform your business completely. Patricia checked her watch. We need to head back to the foundation offices, but Marcus, I want you to know how impressed we are with what you've built here. This garage represents exactly the kind of community asset we're hoping to strengthen and expand. She handed him her business card. Review the documents carefully. If you have questions, call me directly. If you decide to move forward with the full program, we can begin implementation within 2 weeks. 2 weeks? Marcus's voice cracked slightly. We don't believe in letting opportunities gather dust, Patricia said with a grin. Besides, Alina is eager to get started. She's already identified several potential program participants who could benefit from the services you'd be offering. After they left, Marcus sat alone in his spotless garage, surrounded by documents that promised to change his life in ways he'd never imagined. The original loan application seemed small and simple compared to the comprehensive partnership agreement Patricia had left behind. He spread the new papers across his workbench and began reading carefully. Equipment specifications, renovation timelines, program curricula, community outreach plans. It was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all. At once, his phone buzzed with a text message from Alina. How did it go? Marcus looked around his garage, his soon-to-be-transformed garage, and smiled as he typed back. I think I'm going to need a bigger coffee maker. Response came immediately. We'll add that to the equipment list. Congratulations, Marcus. You're about to change the world, one car at a time. Outside, the neighborhood continued its daily rhythm. Cars drove past. People walked to work. Life moved forward with the same steady persistence it always had. But inside Rivera's auto repair, everything was different. Marcus picked up a pen and turned to the signature page of the program agreement. This time, his hand didn't shake at all. The construction crew arrived at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Marcus had signed the program agreement. He'd been awake since 4:30, sitting on the steps outside his garage with a cup of coffee, watching the empty street, and trying to convince himself this was really happening. The first truck was enormous, flatbed carrying what looked like the most advanced automotive lift Marcus had ever seen. The second truck contained power tools, lumber, and building materials. The third was followed by a white van marked Morrison Foundation, Community Development. Alina stepped out of the van wearing jeans, work boots, and a hard hat that somehow managed to look fashionable. She carried a clipboard and wore the expression of someone who genuinely enjoyed watching dreams become reality. Good morning, Marcus, she called out, walking toward him with purposeful strides. Ready to watch your garage disappear? Marcus stood up, brushing coffee grounds from his work pants. Ready as anyone can be for organized chaos, I guess. Where exactly am I supposed to work while all this is happening? Alina pointed to a temporary garage structure that was being assembled in the empty lot next to his building. Portable workshop. To Bay's basic tools. Enough space to handle emergency repairs and keep your regular customers happy? Mrs. Peterson's already called twice to make sure you'll still be able to service her Honda. The temporary setup was more sophisticated than Marcus had expected. While not luxurious, it was clean, functional, and would allow him to maintain his customer relationships during the renovation. Most importantly, it meant he wouldn't lose income during the construction period. How long is this going to take? He asked, watching workers begin unloading equipment. 6 weeks for the main construction, another 2 weeks for equipment, installation, and testing. I know it seems like forever, but we're essentially building you a completely new garage while keeping the original structure intact. A woman in a construction vest approached them, consulting a tablet. Is Vasquez? I'm Rebecca Martinez, site supervisor. We're ready to begin interior demolition, but I wanted to confirm the preservation list one more time. Lena pulled out her own tablet and began reading. Preserve the original flooring in Bay 3. Keep the hand-painted signage above the main entrance. Maintain the customer seating area in the office. Everything else can be upgraded or replaced. Marcus watched as workers began carefully removing his old equipment, treating each piece with respect, even though most of it would be replaced. His ancient diagnostic computer, which had served him faithfully for 6 years, was gently loaded onto a truck destined for electronic recycling. The coffee maker that had brewed thousands of cups of cheap coffee was wrapped in protective padding and set aside. Alina had insisted on keeping it as a reminder of where he'd started. This feels surreal, Marcus admitted, watching his workspace disappear piece by piece. Yesterday I was worried about paying rent. Today I'm watching my garage get transformed into something from my wildest dreams. Alina smiled, but her expression grew serious. Marcus, I need to talk to you about something important. The renovation is just the beginning. The real work starts when construction is finished. She led him to a quiet corner of the lot, away from the noise of demolition. The foundation is investing heavily in this project, not just financially, but reputationally. You're going to be our flagship location, which means there will be expectations and responsibilities that go beyond running a normal garage. Marcus felt a familiar knot forming in his stomach. Kai, what kind of expectations? Media attention, for one thing. Stations want to do stories about the program. The mayor's office is interested in using your garage as an example of community development success. Business journals are calling about featuring you in articles about innovative small business support. The thought of cameras and reporters made Marcus uncomfortable. Alina, I'm a mechanic. I fix cars. I don't know anything about talking to media or being anyone's success story. You know how to be yourself, she said firmly. That's all anyone needs to see. The reason this program works is because it supports authentic people doing meaningful work. Don't try to be someone else. Just be Marcus Rivera, the guy who helps his neighbors and takes pride in his work. A loud crash from inside the garage interrupted their conversation. Both of them turned to see workers carefully demolishing the wall that separated the main workspace from the unused bay. Dust billowed out through the open doors, and the sound of power tools filled the air. Jesus, Marcus muttered. Really tearing the place apart. It's going to look like a war zone for a few weeks, Alina warned. But Rebecca's crew knows what they're doing. By the time they're finished, you'll have twice the workspace. Modern electrical systems, proper ventilation, and equipment that will make your job 10 times easier. She showed him architectural drawings on her tablet. The classroom space will be here, in what used to be the storage area. 20 seats, interactive whiteboard, tool demonstrations area. You'll be teaching automotive basics to people from the community job training program. Marcus studied the drawings, trying to imagine himself as an instructor. I've never taught anyone anything. What if I'm terrible at it? You taught me how to ride on the back of a motorcycle in about 30 seconds. Alina pointed out. Teaching is just showing people how to do things you already know how to do. Plus, we'll provide curriculum support and training resources. A young man in a Morrison Foundation t-shirt approached them carrying a box of equipment. Ms. Vasquez? Where do you want the computer system set up? Alina pointed toward the temporary garage. Install the basic diagnostic equipment in Bay 1 of the temporary facility. Marcus needs to be able to work while construction is happening. The young man nodded and headed toward the temporary building. Marcus watched him go, still struggling to process the scope of what was happening around him. Alina, can I ask you? Something? Of course. Why automotive? I mean, the foundation could have chosen any trade to focus on. Why car repair? Elena's expression grew thoughtful. Do you know what the most common reason is for people losing their jobs? Marcus shook his head. Transportation problems. Car breaks down. Can't afford to fix it. Can't get to work. Lose the job. It's a cycle that traps families in poverty. Reliable, affordable automotive services aren't just convenient. They're essential for economic stability. She gestured toward the busy street beyond the construction zone. Every car that drives past represents someone's ability to work, to take their kids to school, to access health care, to participate in their community. What you do here isn't just fixing engines, you're maintaining the infrastructure that allows people to build better lives. The weight of that responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders like a heavy coat. No pressure or anything. Alina laughed. Actually, there's pressure, but it's good pressure. It's the kind that makes you rise to meet it. She checked her watch. Speaking of which, I have someone I'd like you to meet. A few minutes later, a young woman approached the construction site. She looked to be in her early 20s, with short dark hair and the kind of nervous energy that suggested she was either very excited or very worried about something. Marcus, this is Jessica Torres, Alina said. She's a graduate of the Central Phoenix Community College Automotive Program, and she's interested in the apprentice position we discussed. Marcus shook Jessica's hand, noting the firm grip and the small calluses that suggested she'd already spent time working with tools. Nice to meet you, Jessica. Alina mentioned you're looking for hands-on experience, yes, sir? I finished the classroom portion of the program last month, but most shops want experienced mechanics. It's hard to get experience when no one will hire you without experience. Jessica's voice carried a mixture of frustration and determination that Marcus recognized. "What kind of cars have you worked on?" "Mostly domestic models in the school lab. Some basic diagnostic work, oil changes, brake jobs, tire rotations. Nothing too complicated, but I know my way around an engine bay." Then Jessica looked toward the construction chaos. Ms. Vasquez said, "You might be expanding your operation?" Marcus glanced at Alina, who nodded encouragingly. "Yeah, we we're. Once construction is finished, I'll need help managing the increased workload." "Are you interested in learning transmission work?" Jessica's eyes lit up. "Are you serious? Most places won't let apprentices near transmissions." "Most places are worried about liability and profit margins," Marcus said. "I'm more interested in teaching people to do good work. If you're willing to learn and you don't mind getting dirty, I can teach you everything I know." Lena stepped forward. Jessica would be participating in the Foundation's apprenticeship program. "We provide her salary for the first 6 months while she's learning, then you take over employment at standard wages. It's designed to help businesses grow their workforce without taking on financial risk during the training period." Marcus looked at Jessica, seeing something of himself in her eagerness and anxiety. "When can you start?" "Tomorrow," Jessica said hopefully. "Say next week, when the temporary workspace is fully operational. You can help me move equipment and learn the basics while we wait for the main garage to be finished." After left, Alina and Marcus walked through the temporary garage, checking on the equipment installation. The space was smaller than his original garage, but equipped with newer diagnostic tools and better lighting. "You made a good choice with Jessica," Alina said. "Her instructors speak very highly of her technical skills and work ethic." "She reminds me of myself when I was starting out," Marcus admitted. "Eager to prove herself, willing to work hard, just needs someone to give her a chance." They were interrupted by Rebecca, the construction supervisor, who approached with her tablet and a concerned expression. "Ms. Vasquez, we've run into a small problem. When we opened up the wall between the bays, we discovered some structural issues that need to be addressed. Nothing dangerous, but it's going to add about a week to the timeline and require some additional materials." Alina frowned. "What kind of structural issues?" "The previous tenant made some modifications to support heavy equipment, but they didn't do it properly. We need to reinforce the foundation and install proper support beams before we can continue with the renovation." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "How much is this going to cost?" Rebecca consulted her tablet. "About $8,000 in additional materials and labor." Alina didn't hesitate. "Do it. Whatever needs to be done to make the structure safe and sound. This building needs to last for decades." "Alina, $8,000, Marcus started. "Is an investment in your future?" she interrupted. "Marcus, we're not cutting corners on this project. When we're finished, you'll have a facility that's built to last and equipped to grow with your business." As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself alternating between excitement and anxiety. The scope of the renovation was breathtaking. New electrical systems, modern HVAC, professional-grade equipment that would have been science fiction in his old garage. But with each improvement came the weight of increased expectations and responsibilities. Around 5 p.m., as the construction crew was cleaning up for the day, Alina found Marcus sitting in the temporary garage, staring at a diagnostic computer that was worth more than his motorcycle. "Second thoughts?" she asked gently. "More like 10th or 11th thoughts," Marcus admitted. "Lena, what if I can't live up to all this? What if I'm not the person you think I am?" Lena sat down next to him on an upturned crate. "Marcus, you remember what you told me the day we met? I offered to pay you for the ride. I said I didn't save your life. I just gave you a ride." "Exactly. You saw it as a simple act of kindness, nothing special. But for me, it changed everything. It saved my presentation, my program, and possibly my career." Elena turned to face him directly. "You have a gift for seeing simple humanity in complex situations. That's exactly what this community needs. Someone who understands that big changes happen through small acts of care and competence." The construction site grew quiet as the last workers packed up their tools. Tomorrow would bring another day of controlled chaos, another step toward transformation. 6 weeks, Marcus. said, looking around at the temporary workspace that would be his home until the renovation was complete. 6 weeks, Alina agreed. And then the real adventure begins. 4 weeks into construction, Marcus woke up to the sound of his phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. The caller ID showed Elena's number, and the clock read 5:47 a.m. Elena? Everything okay, Marcus? Turn on Channel 12 News right now. Marcus fumbled for the remote control, his brain still foggy with sleep. The morning news was already in progress, showing footage of the renovation at his garage. His garage. On television. Innovative community development program that's transforming both businesses and lives in Phoenix, the reporter was saying. The Morrison Foundation's Community Skills Bridge program has chosen Rivera's Auto Repair as their flagship location, investing over $70,000 in renovations and equipment upgrades. The camera panned across the construction site, showing workers installing the new automotive lifts. Marcus watched in surreal fascination as his life became a news story. The program aims to create high-quality jobs while providing essential services to underserved communities. The reporter continued. We'll be following this story as the renovation progresses and the training programs begin. How did they? Marcus started. Rebecca gave them a tour yesterday while you were at the parts supplier, Elena explained. I meant to warn you, but they moved faster than expected. Marcus, this is good news. Exposure will bring attention to the program and help establish your garage as a community resource. Marcus stared at the television screen, watching strangers discuss his business on live television. I look like I'm about to throw up. You look like someone who's about to change his community for the better, which is exactly what you are. After hanging up, Marcus made coffee and tried to process what he'd just seen. In 4 weeks, his quiet neighborhood garage had become a symbol of community transformation. The weight of that responsibility felt heavier each day. By the time he arrived at the temporary garage, Jessica was already there, organizing tools and reviewing diagnostic procedures. She'd been working with him for 3 weeks, and her progress was remarkable. What she lacked in experience, she made up for with intelligence and an almost supernatural ability to diagnose problems by listening to engine sounds. "Morning, boss," Jessica called out, not looking up from the transmission she was inspecting. Mrs. Rodriguez's Camry's making that whining noise again. I think it's the CV joint this time, not the transmission. Marcus walked over and listened as Jessica started the engine. She was right. The distinctive whining of a failing CV joint was unmistakable once you knew what to listen for. Good catch, he said. How did you know it wasn't the transmission? Noise only happens when turning, and it's more pronounced when backing out of parking spaces. Transmission noise would be constant during acceleration. Jessica grinned. Plus, you taught me that most transmission problems feel different than they sound. Marcus felt a surge of pride. Teaching Jessica had turned out to be one of the most rewarding aspects of the entire program. She absorbed information like a sponge and asked questions that forced him to think more deeply about why he did things certain ways. We've got 3 more cars coming in today, Jessica said, consulting their appointment book. Oil change on the Henderson's truck, brake inspection for the Martinez family, and someone called about a check engine light on a 2018 Accord, A2018. Accord, Marcus raised his eyebrows. Their typical customers drove much older vehicles. That's not our usual demographic. I know. The guy said he saw the news story and wanted to support local business, specifically asked for you by name. Before Marcus could respond, a pristine Honda Accord pulled into the temporary garage. Oh, the driver was a man in his 40s wearing an expensive suit and the kind of watch that cost more than Marcus used to make in a month, Mr. Rivera. The man extended his hand as he got out of the car. I'm David Chen, Sarah's father. I believe you met my daughter during your foundation assessment. Marcus remembered Sarah, the eager young woman with a tablet who'd taken notes during Patricia's visit. Of course. How can I help you? My check engine light came on yesterday. My usual dealer wants to charge me $150 just for diagnostics, plus whatever the repair costs. Sarah told me about your reputation for honest service, so I thought I'd give you a try. Marcus hooked up his diagnostic equipment to the Honda's computer system. The readout showed a faulty oxygen sensor, a common problem that was neither expensive nor complicated to fix. "It's your upstream oxygen sensor," Marcus explained, showing David the diagnostic screen. "Part costs about $40. Labor is another $30. The sensor's sending incorrect data to your engine computer, which triggers the check engine light." David frowned. "That's it?" "My dealer said it could be anything from a loose gas cap to a major engine problem." "Well, they're not wrong," Marcus said diplomatically. "Check engine lights can indicate a lot of different issues, but the diagnostic code is pretty specific in this case." While Marcus and Jessica worked on the Honda, David wandered around the temporary garage, asking questions about their equipment and procedures. He seemed genuinely interested in the technical aspects of automotive repair. "Sarah mentioned you're going to be running training programs," David said as Marcus installed the new oxygen sensor. "What kind of training exactly?" "Basic automotive maintenance and repair," Jessica answered. "Oil changes, brake work, diagnostics, stuff that helps people either maintain their own cars or learn skills for employment. That's fascinating. I run a small investment firm downtown, and we're always looking for ways to support community development. Would it be possible to observe one of these training sessions when they start?" Marcus looked up from the engine bay. "You want to watch people learn to change oil?" David laughed. "You'd be surprised how much you can learn about someone's character by watching them tackle an unfamiliar challenge. Plus, my daughter speaks very highly of this program, and Sarah has excellent judgment about people and projects." Left with a perfectly running car and a surprisingly small repair, Bill, Marcus, and Jessica spent the afternoon working on routine maintenance jobs. The steady rhythm of familiar work was soothing after the morning's unexpected television exposure. Around 3 p.m., Alina arrived with a man Marcus had never seen before. He was tall and lean, with graying hair, and the kind of deep tan that suggested he spent a lot of time outdoors. His handshake was firm, and his eyes held the alertness of someone accustomed to solving complex problems. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet Roberto Mendez," Alina said. "He's our curriculum specialist for the training programs. Roberto has 20 years of experience developing technical education programs for community colleges." Roberto walked through the temporary garage, observing their work setup and asking detailed questions about their typical repair procedures. Unlike the Foundation's other representatives, he focused on practical details. How long different jobs took, what tools were most essential, which skills took the longest to develop. "Jessica," Roberto said, "Alina tells me you're learning transmission work. How would you explain the difference between a manual and automatic transmission to someone who's never worked on cars?" Jessica wiped her hands on a shop rag, considering the question. "A manual transmission is like riding a bicycle with gears. You have to decide when to shift based on what you're doing. An automatic transmission is like a smart bicycle that changes gears for you based on how fast you're going and how hard you're pedaling." Roberto smiled. "That's an excellent analogy. Teaching complex technical concepts requires breaking them down into familiar comparisons." He turned to Marcus.
"How long did it take Jessica to feel comfortable with basic diagnostics?"
"About 2 weeks for the fundamentals," Marcus said. "But she had some background from community college."
"Complete beginners would probably need a month of hands-on practice." Roberto made notes on his tablet. "The Foundation wants to launch the first training session 6 weeks after your renovation is complete. We're thinking of a 3-month program. 1 evening per week, focusing on practical skills that translate to either personal vehicle maintenance or entry-level employment." "How many students?" Jessica asked. 12 for the first session, a mix of people looking to save money on car repairs and others interested in automotive careers. The classroom space will accommodate up to 20, but we want to keep the first group small." Alina pulled out her phone, showing Marcus's photos of the ongoing renovation. The main garage was unrecognizable. Walls had been opened up, new electrical systems installed, and the foundation reinforced. It looked more like a construction site than an automotive shop. "Rebecca says we're still on schedule despite the structural work," Alina reported. "The new lifts will be installed next week, followed by the diagnostic equipment and classroom setup." Marcus studied the photos, trying to imagine teaching a room full of students in the space where he'd spent So many years working alone. Roberto, what if I'm not good at this? I can teach Jessica because it's one-on-one, but a whole classroom. Teaching mechanics isn't much different from diagnosing car problems, Roberto said. You observe, ask questions, identify what's not working, and then fix it step by step. The main difference is that instead of fixing engines, you're helping people understand concepts. He handed Marcus a thick manual. This is the curriculum we've developed, but it's flexible. The goal isn't to create textbook mechanics. It's to help people develop practical skills and confidence. Your job is to demonstrate procedures, answer questions, and provide encouragement when people get frustrated. Jessica flipped through the manual, her eyes growing wide. This covers everything: basic maintenance, electrical systems, brake work, even some engine repair. The beauty of automotive training is that it's immediately practical, Roberto explained. Students can apply what they learn to their own vehicles right away. There's instant gratification when someone successfully changes their own oil or replaces their own brake pads. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus found himself warming to the idea of teaching. Roberto's approach was practical and supportive, focused on building confidence rather than testing knowledge. The curriculum was designed around real-world problems and solutions, not abstract theory. One more thing, Alina said as Roberto prepared to leave. Channel 12 wants to do a follow-up story when the renovation is complete. They're interested in filming one of your first training sessions. Marcus groaned. More television? More exposure? For the program, Alina corrected. Marcus, this isn't just about your garage anymore. You're demonstrating that community-based training programs can work. Other cities are watching what we're doing here. After Alina and Roberto left, Marcus and Jessica worked late into the evening, finishing up the day's repairs and organizing tools for tomorrow's appointments. The temporary garage felt small and cramped compared to what was being built next. But it had served them well during the construction period. Marcus, Jessica said as they were locking up, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't helped that woman with directions? None of this would have happened, right? Marcus considered the question. For weeks ago, his biggest worry had been paying rent. Night, he was planning the curriculum for automotive training programs and preparing for television interviews. Think about it all the time, he admitted. But you know what? I think something like this was bound to happen eventually. It's maybe not exactly this, but something. Good things happen to people who try to do right by their neighbors. Jessica smiled. You really believe that? Marcus looked toward the construction site, where security lights illuminated the skeleton of his new garage. Tomorrow would bring more progress, more changes, more steps toward a future he'd never imagined possible. Yeah, he said. I really do. Walking up the stairs to his apartment, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just 2 months. The scared, struggling mechanic who'd helped a lost woman find her way had evolved into someone preparing to teach others too. Build something lasting, to make a real difference in his community. The water stain on his ceiling hadn't changed. It was still there, still growing, still reminding him of where he'd come from. But now it felt less like a symbol of failure and more like a reminder of resilience. Some things took time to fix properly, and some changes were worth waiting for. The day Marcus first walked into his renovated garage, he stood in the doorway for a full 5 minutes without saying a word. The space was unrecognizable, transformed into something that belonged in a luxury car dealership rather than an industrial neighborhood in Phoenix. Gone were the cracked concrete floors, replaced by polished epoxy coating that gleamed under LED. Lighting. The new automotive lifts rose from the floor like sculptures, their chrome surfaces reflecting the morning sun streaming through oversized windows that had been cut into the eastern wall. Where his ancient diagnostic computer once sat, a state-of-the-art workstation commanded the central bay, its multiple monitors displaying real-time data feeds and diagnostic capabilities he'd only dreamed about. Well, Elena asked, standing behind him with barely contained excitement, what do you think? Marcus walked slowly through the space, running his hands along pristine workbenches equipped with pneumatic tool systems. The air smelled of fresh paint and new equipment, instead of decades of accumulated oil and grease. In the far corner, where he used to pile spare parts and old tires, a glass-walled classroom overlooked the main work area. 20 chairs surrounded a conference table equipped with tablets and interactive displays. "It's incredible," he said finally. "But it doesn't feel like mine." Elena's expression shifted to concern. "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's beautiful, it's professional, it's everything I could have wanted. But this place has character because it was rough around the edges. This looks like..." He gestured around the immaculate space. "It's like somewhere important people work." "Marcus," Elena said gently, "you are an important person. You just haven't recognized it yet." Jessica emerged from the classroom area, her face flushed with excitement. "Marcus, you have to see the tool inventory system. Everything is cataloged electronically, with automatic reordering when supplies get low. The diagnostic equipment can interface with manufactured databases in real time." Despite his reservations about the garage's transformation, Marcus couldn't help but smile at Jessica's enthusiasm.
Ow.
Over the past 6 weeks, she'd evolved from a nervous apprentice into a confident technician capable of handling complex repairs independently. The renovation had given her something to grow into rather than just a place to learn basic skills. "There's someone I'd like you to meet," Elena said, leading them toward the customer reception area. A woman in her 50s sat in one of the new leather chairs, reading a magazine and looking perfectly comfortable in the upscale environment. "Marcus, this is Dr. Angela Foster, runs the Community Skills Network, which coordinates job training programs across 3 counties. Angela, this is Marcus Rivera and Jessica Torres." Dr. Foster stood and shook their hands with the warmth of someone genuinely interested in their work. "I've been hearing remarkable things about your program. Lena tells me you're planning to expand beyond basic automotive training." "We are." Marcus looked at Elena with surprise. "That's what I wanted to discuss," Elena said. "Dr. Foster's organization has identified a significant need for small engine repair training. Lawn mowers, generators, equipment that keeps small businesses and households running. The skills transfer naturally from automotive work, but the market is completely underserved." Dr. Foster nodded enthusiastically. "There are thousands of people in this area who depend on small engines for their livelihoods. Landscapers, contractors, homeowners who can't afford professional repairs. If your students could learn those skills alongside automotive maintenance, they'd have multiple income streams available." Marcus considered the idea. Small engine repair was simpler than automotive work in many ways, but required the same diagnostic, thinking and mechanical aptitude. It was also the kind of service that could be performed from a home garage. It's making it perfect for people looking to start their own businesses. "What would that look like practically?" Jessica asked. "We'd expand your classroom to include small engine training stations," Dr. Foster explained. "Students would learn automotive basics first, then apply those same principles to smaller equipment. The foundation has already approved funding for the additional equipment and curriculum development." Elena pulled out her tablet, showing architectural drawings of the proposed expansion. "We'd extend the classroom into the adjacent bay, add specialized workbenches for small engine repair, and create a tool lending library where graduates could borrow equipment for their own businesses." Marcus studied the drawings, seeing the logical progression from his original vision to something much more comprehensive. What had started as a simple garage renovation was becoming a comprehensive training center that could serve his community in ways he'd never imagined. "How many people are we talking about training?" he asked, conservatively. 50 to 60 students per year across both programs, Dr. Foster said. "But the real impact would be the ripple effect. Each graduate becomes a resource for their family and neighbors, multiplying the community benefit." A knock on the front door interrupted their conversation. Through the new glass entrance, Marcus could see Mrs. Peterson standing outside with several other neighbors. Connor went to let them in, and soon the garage was filled with familiar faces, people Marcus had been serving from his temporary workspace during the renovation. "He brought a little housewarming gift," Mrs. Peterson announced, producing a covered dish that smelled like heaven. "My famous tres leches cake. Figured you might be hungry after moving into your fancy new place." Behind her, Carlos Mendoza carried a cooler filled with soft drinks, and Maria Santos held a bouquet of flowers from her garden. These were the people who'd kept his business alive during the lean years. who trusted him with their transportation needs when they could barely afford repairs. "This is beautiful, Marcus," Maria said, looking around the transformed space with wonder. "But where are you going to put our cars? Everything looks too clean to get dirty." Marcus laughed, realizing she'd identified exactly what was bothering him about the renovation. "That's a good question. Maybe I should put plastic covers over everything." "Don't you dare," Elena said firmly. "This equipment was designed to be used, not admired. The whole point is to create a workspace that makes your job easier and more efficient." Carlos walked over to examine one of the new lifts. "How much weight can this thing handle?" 8,000 pounds, Jessica answered proudly. "And it has electronic safety locks, automatic positioning, and hydraulic assists for easy operation." 8,000 pounds, Carlos repeated, impressed. "My old Suburban weighs about 6,000. This could actually lift it. Want to see?" Marcus asked, surprising himself. Before he could second-guess the decision, he was starting up the lift system and positioning Carlos's truck over the hydraulic platform. Within minutes, the massive SUV was rising smoothly into the air, its undercarriage now easily accessible for inspection. The neighbors gathered around in amazement, asking questions about the equipment and watching Marcus demonstrate features he was still learning himself. "Look at that," Mrs. Peterson said, pointing to the diagnostic screen displaying real-time data from Carlos's engine. "It can tell you everything that's happening inside the motor while it's running." Marcus found himself explaining the diagnostic capabilities with growing enthusiasm. The new equipment didn't just make repairs faster and more accurate, it allowed him to show customers exactly what was wrong with their vehicles, building trust through transparency. "This changes everything," he realized aloud. "Instead of just telling people what's wrong, I can show them. They can understand what they're paying for." Dr. Foster smiled. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that makes successful training programs. You're not just fixing cars, you're educating people about how their vehicles work." As the informal celebration continued, Marcus noticed Alina standing slightly apart from the group, watching the interaction between him and his customers. When their eyes met, she smiled and nodded toward the classroom area. "Can I show you something?" she asked, leading him away from the crowd. The classroom was equipped with everything Roberto had promised: interactive displays, hands-on training, stations, even a small kitchen area where students could take breaks during longer sessions. But Alina led him to a wall display he hadn't noticed before. It was a timeline of the Community Skills Bridge program, with photos and descriptions of each phase of development. At the center was a large photograph of Marcus helping Alina with directions on that first day, captioned, "Where it all began." "I didn't know you had a picture of that," Marcus said, studying the image. "Thomas took it from the limo while you were talking. Keep it as a reminder that the most important changes often start with the smallest gestures." Below the timeline was a plaque, Rivera's Auto Repair and Community Training Center, dedicated to the principle that skilled hands and generous hearts can transform communities. Marcus read the plaque twice, feeling the weight of responsibility and possibility in equal measure. This wasn't just his garage anymore. It was a symbol of what could be accomplished when people invested in each other's potential. "The first training session starts next Monday," Elena said. 12 students, 3-month program. Everything we've been planning for the past 2 months. Are you ready?" Marcus looked through the classroom windows at his friends and neighbors exploring the renovated garage, their faces bright with curiosity and pride. These were the people who'd supported him through the difficult years, who'd trusted him with their cars and their family's safety. Now he had the opportunity to do more than just fix their vehicles. He could help them develop skills that might change their own lives. "No," he said honestly. "I'm not ready. I'm terrified, actually. But I'm going to do it anyway," Lena laughed. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. The best teachers are the ones who remember what it feels like to learn something new." Over the next hour, Marcus gave tours of the facility to each of his customers, explaining the new equipment and answering questions about the training programs. Mrs. Peterson was particularly interested in the basic maintenance classes, mentioning that her grandson might benefit from learning practical skills. "You know what the best part of all this is?" Carlos asked as the informal celebration began winding down. "What's that? You're still you?" "All this fancy equipment, these big plans. It's the television cameras, but you're still the same guy who will explain what's wrong. It's my truck, and charge me a fair price to fix it. After everyone left, Marcus and Jessica spent the evening familiarizing themselves with the new equipment and organizing tools. The learning curve was steep, but the capabilities were extraordinary. Diagnostic procedures that used to take hours could now be completed in minutes, with greater accuracy and detailed documentation. Marcus, Jessica said as they were locking up, what happens to me when the training programs start? I mean, am I still your apprentice, or do I become a student like everyone else? It was a question Marcus had been avoiding, but one that needed an answer. Jessica had progressed far beyond basic apprentice level. She was capable of handling most repairs independently, and had proven herself as both a skilled technician and a natural teacher. Actually, he said, I was hoping you'd help me with the training programs. Roberto thinks you'd be excellent at working with students who are just starting out. You remember what it was like to be confused and overwhelmed. Jessica's face lit up. You mean like a teaching assistant? It's more like a junior instructor? Someone who can demonstrate basic procedures while I handle the more complex technical explanations? What do you think? I think, Jessica said, looking around the transformed garage, that this is going to be the best job in the world. Walking up to his apartment that night, Marcus reflected on how completely his life had changed. The scared, struggling mechanic who'd helped a lost woman find her way had become someone preparing to train the next generation of automotive technicians. The garage that had barely kept him afloat was now a community resource that could impact hundreds of lives. But perhaps most importantly, he'd learned that success wasn't about escaping your circumstances. It was about transforming them into something that served a larger purpose. His neighborhood hadn't changed. His customers were still the same people. And he was still the guy who fixed cars for a living. The difference was that now he was doing it from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, with the resources too. Do it right, and the support to help others along the way. 6 months after the first training class graduated, Marcus stood in his garage at 5:30 a.m., watching the sunrise paint the eastern wall in shades of gold and orange. The space hummed with quiet activity, diagnostic computers running overnight updates, air compressors cycling automatically, the coffee maker he'd insisted on keeping gurgling to life on its timer. This had become his favorite time of day. These quiet moments before the controlled chaos of running a training center and full-service garage began. In a few hours, the space would fill with students, customers, and the purposeful noise of people learning and working. It was just him and the satisfied hum of a business that had found its rhythm. The phone rang, interrupting his meditation. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Rivera's Auto Repair and Training Center, he answered. Mr. Rivera? This is Detective Sarah Valdez with Phoenix PD. I'm calling about Michael Santos, I believe. He was one of your students? Marcus immediately thought of Maria Santos's nephew, a quiet young man who'd completed the automotive program 3 months earlier. Michael had struggled with the academic portions, but shown exceptional aptitude for diagnostic work. Yes, Michael finished our program in January. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, sir. Actually, I'm calling with good news. Michael helped us solve a case yesterday, and I wanted you to know about it. Detective Valdez explained that Michael, now working at an independent garage across town, had identified evidence of insurance fraud in a vehicle that was brought in for accident repairs. His careful documentation and technical knowledge had helped uncover a scam that might have cost insurance companies hundreds of thousands of dollars. The thing is, Detective Valdez continued, Michael told us he learned to pay attention to details like that in your program. He said you taught students that being a good mechanic meant being observant about everything, not just engine problems. After hanging up, Marcus felt a familiar surge of pride mixed with amazement. Every week brought new stories about program graduates, someone starting their own business, getting promoted at work, helping family members with car repairs. The ripple effects extended far beyond what he'd imagined possible. Jessica arrived. At 6:15, carrying coffee and a box of donuts from the bakery down the street, she'd been promoted to lead instructor for the basic maintenance program and had developed her own following among students who appreciated her patient teaching style and practical approach to problem solving. Channel 7 wants to interview 3 of our graduates for a follow-up story, she reported, settling into the office chair that had become hers by default. Apparently, the state education department is considering replicating our program in other cities? Other cities? Marcus looked up from the appointment schedule he'd been reviewing. How many other cities? Lena didn't say exactly, but she mentioned getting calls from mayor's offices in Tucson, Albuquerque, and El Paso. They want to know how we've achieved such high graduation rates and job placement success. The success statistics were impressive, even Marcus had to admit. Of the 68 students who'd completed training programs over the past 6 months, 59 had found employment in automotive or related fields within 90 days of graduation. Another 7 had started their own small businesses, and the remaining 2 had enrolled in community college. Automotive programs for advanced training, but more important than the statistics were the individual stories. People like Carmen Rodriguez, a single mother who'd used her training to become the first female mechanic at a local dealership, or James Thompson, a recently discharged veteran who'd struggled with civilian employment until he discovered an aptitude for small engine repair and opened a lawn care equipment service. Elena's coming by this morning, Jessica continued. She wants to discuss expanding the classroom space again. Apparently we have a waiting list of 40 people for the next session. Marcus poured coffee and considered the implications. Success was wonderful, but it brought its own challenges. They were already running training sessions 4 nights a week, and his regular automotive service was busier than ever, thanks to the program's reputation for honest, quality work. At 8 a.m., first customers began arriving for scheduled appointments. Marcus had maintained his commitment to serving the neighborhood residents who'd supported him during the difficult years. But the clientele now included people from across the metro area who came specifically because of the garage's reputation. Dr. Chen's investment group had become regular customers, bringing their fleet vehicles for maintenance and referring other business clients. The television coverage had attracted attention from car enthusiasts who appreciated the combination of modern equipment and old-fashioned customer service. Most surprisingly, several luxury car dealerships had begun referring customers for specialized work that required the kind of detailed attention Marcus's team provided. Around 10 a.m., Lena arrived with a man Marcus had never met. He was younger than most foundation executives, probably in his early 30s, the kind of intense energy that suggested he was accustomed to making quick decisions and implementing big plans. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet Jonathan Martinez," Alina said. "He represents a group of investors who are very interested in what we've built here." Jonathan walked through the garage with obvious appreciation, asking detailed questions about equipment costs, training curricula, and operational procedures. Unlike previous visitors who'd focused on the social impact of the programs, he seemed most interested in the business model and financial sustainability. "What's your current revenue split between automotive services and training programs?" asked, consulting notes on his tablet. Marcus looked at Jessica, who'd become adept at handling the business side of their operation. "About 60-40, she answered. "Automotive services generate more revenue, but the training programs have higher profit margins because of foundation support and corporate sponsorships. And without foundation support, we'd need to charge higher tuition or reduce instructor compensation," Jessica said honestly.
Ow!
"The community-focused pricing model depends on external funding to remain accessible." Jonathan nodded, making more notes. "What if I told you we could help you scale this model to 20 locations across the Southwest, with full private funding and expanded training programs?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus felt his stomach tighten with a familiar anxiety, the same feeling he'd experienced when Elena first offered him the loan that started everything. "I'd say that sounds like a conversation for Elena and the foundation board," Marcus replied carefully. "Actually," Elena said, "that's why we're here. The foundation is considering partnering with private investors to expand successful programs. Your garage would become the flagship location for a regional network of community training centers." Jonathan opened his tablet, showing charts and projections that made Marcus's head spin. We were talking about significant expansion, larger facilities, more sophisticated equipment, partnerships with community colleges for certification programs. You'd oversee training standards across all locations while maintaining operations here. What would that mean for our current students and customers? Jessica asked. Advanced services, Jonathan said enthusiastically. More training options. Better job placement assistance. Connections to nationwide employment networks. Think of it as taking what works here and making it available to thousands more people. Marcus studied the projections, trying to understand the implications. The numbers were staggering. Millions of dollars in investment, hundreds of potential students, training programs that could impact entire communities. It was everything he dreamed about when he first signed Elena's loan application, but magnified beyond anything he'd imagined possible. Can I ask you something, Jonathan? Marcus said. Why automotive training? There are lots of successful community programs you could invest in. Jonathan's expression grew serious. Because skilled trades are the backbone of economic mobility in America. College isn't the right path for everyone, but everyone deserves access to training that can provide middle-class income and job security. What you've built here proves that model can work, Lena added. The Foundation's research shows that automotive and small engine repair skills have some of the highest return on investment for training programs. Students can apply their knowledge immediately, either for personal savings or income generation. Around noon, the first afternoon training session began. 12 new students filed into the classroom, representing the usual mix of ages, backgrounds, and motivations. There was Maria, a 62-year-old grandmother who wanted to maintain her own car. Devin, a 19-year-old who'd struggled in traditional academic settings but showed mechanical aptitude. And Robert, a laid-off factory worker looking to develop marketable skills. Marcus introduced the basic concepts of automotive systems while Jessica demonstrated diagnostic procedures. The students asked thoughtful questions and showed genuine enthusiasm for learning practical skills. Watching them work through their first hands-on exercises, Marcus felt the same satisfaction he'd experienced when helping Alina find her way to the Morrison Foundation building after the session ended. Jonathan approached him with obvious excitement. That was incredible to watch. The students were completely engaged, and your teaching style makes complex concepts accessible without dumbing them down. Thanks, Marcus said, though he was focused on cleaning up the training area for the next session. Marcus, Alina said gently, this is an incredible opportunity. The kind of expansion Jonathan's proposing could help thousands of people develop valuable skills. You'd be creating a legacy that extends far beyond Phoenix. Marcus looked around his garage, the space where everything had started, where Mrs. Peterson still brought her Honda for maintenance, where neighborhood kids sometimes stopped by to ask questions about engines. It was successful, profitable, and making a real difference in people's lives. I need time to think about this, he said finally. Of course, Jonathan said. But I should mention that we have a timeline for investment decisions. Other markets are interested and the economic climate favors this kind of expansion, right? Now, after they left, Marcus and Jessica worked through the afternoon appointment schedule in relative quiet. But during breaks between customers, their conversation kept returning to the expansion proposal. What do you think? Marcus asked, as they waited for the 3 p.m. appointment to arrive. I think it's amazing and terrifying, Jessica said honestly. It's amazing because we could help so many more people. Terrifying because we might lose what makes this place special. She gestured around the garage. This works because it's personal. You know your students, your customers, your community. How do you maintain that across 20 locations? It was the same question that had been bothering Marcus since Jonathan's presentation. Success was wonderful, but it brought the risk of losing the human connections that made the work meaningful. That evening, after the last training session ended and the final customer collected their repaired vehicle, Marcus climbed the stairs to his apartment. The water stain on the ceiling had finally been fixed during a recent renovation, but he kept a photo of it on his refrigerator as a reminder of where he'd started. His phone buzzed with a text from Alina. No pressure, but I believe in whatever decision you make. You've already exceeded every expectation. Marcus walked to his kitchen window and looked down at the garage. Tomorrow would bring new students, returning customers, and the satisfying rhythm of work that mattered. The expansion opportunity was real and significant, but so was what he'd already built. He thought about the scared mechanic who'd helped a lost woman find her way, never imagining that simple act of kindness would lead to television interviews, training programs, and investment opportunities. The journey had been extraordinary, but perhaps the most important lesson was that meaningful change happened one person at a time. One act of service at a time. Marcus picked up his phone and called Elena. "I've made my decision," he said when she answered, "and I want to hear more about the expansion, but only if we can guarantee that every location maintains the same community focus we have here. It's not about the money or the recognition. It's about helping people in ways that preserve their dignity and build their confidence." Elena's laugh was warm and unsurprised. "I wouldn't expect anything less from you. Jonathan's going to be thrilled. Those are exactly the values that make this program worth scaling." 6 months later, Marcus stood in an identical garage in Tucson, watching local mechanics learn to implement community training programs. The expansion had been successful beyond everyone's projections. With waiting lists at every location and job placement rates that attracted national attention. But the moment that mattered most came at the end of his first day in Tucson, when a woman approached him in the parking lot. "Excuse me," she said nervously. "I heard you're starting automotive training programs here. I'm a single mother, and I can't afford to keep paying for car repairs. Do you think someone like me could learn to do basic maintenance?" Marcus smiled, remembering another lost woman who'd changed his life by simply asking for directions. "Ma'am," he said, "I think you're exactly the kind of person this program was designed for. Let me tell you what's possible." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Let's click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.